Adnams and Thornbridge, nevermore.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This one, picked it up from Morrison's, and it's a collaboration brew. Now, there's a lot to get through on this one, and I was prepared for a rant until I'd done some researching into it. So let's just get all this out of the way first. This was in Morrison's. It cost me £2 for a 330ml can, which isn't bad considering it's a collaboration with a craft brewer. Now, you know my views on craft brewers. It's a sort of love-hate relationship. I don't like the way they overemphasize IPAs. They call everything, and this is another thing as well. You know, the oversaturation of American hops in the beers that they produce. Not everybody likes them flavours. I've got a sort of a love-hate relationship with them. If I do find that there are some good ones out there. I do quite like some New England IPAs and some of the Citra hopped beers that are out there, but there are some that just go way over the top, and the price as well is another thing for me. They're quite expensive for what they are, and I think you can get better value for money. But I'm not knocking them. You know, if there's a market out there or there's a vacuum that needs filling, then crack on. I don't review much craft beer on this channel simply for the reason that I think it gets vast coverage on almost every other reviewer's channel, which I think is brilliant. But for me, I just want to keep things traditional, and at the end of the day, I want to review beers that I like the look of. Now, that you may argue is not the real role of a beer critic. I should be trying everything, but it's all just opinions. And to be honest, I'm not made of money. I don't want to be buying every single beer that comes out, and if I don't like it, it goes down the drain. That's not really what I want to do. So I want to give myself a bit of a chance to like some beer. Believe me, I don't like ranting and raving about beers, and I don't like giving beers low marks. But if they're bad, that's what I'm going to do. And I try and filter out beers that I don't think I'm going to like. And it's simply for the fact, not only does it makes me look angry and bitter about beers, but I don't want to come across like that. You know, people that are brewing beer, I have the utmost respect for, whether they be big brewers, macro brewers. If you're going to be employing dodgy marketing tactics, if you're blatantly taking the piss with prices, or you just, I don't like your ethics, then yeah, I'll let you know. But you know, for everybody who's brewing beer and making a living out of it, even Brewdog, crack on. Right, so we got that out of the way. So I picked this up in Morrison's. It's a collaboration between Thornbridge and Adnams. Now, Adnams being on the side of this can is the reason I picked it up. I love Adnams beer. It is a fantastic brewer. I love what they do. I don't think I've had a bad Adnams beer. And I genuinely like how they're quite traditional. They use local ingredients, and they generally brew good beer. Thornbridge, on the other hand, I'm not a fan of. I think they're a very average brewer. I think their beers are expensive. When Jaipur first came out, that's their flagship IPA. It was quite new and quite exciting. It took a while to get used to that flavour, but I see now, and I'm convinced of it, the recipe has changed. I can half understand why, because it's become so popular and they need to fulfil the demand for that beer. They're also supplying to supermarkets, so they have to brew quite a lot of the stuff, and maybe they've, I wouldn't say cut corners, but it's not the beer that it was, and I'm not a fan of it anymore, to be honest. I don't really like what they do in other beers as well. If you look on the channel, when I first started up for this channel, I was reviewing craft beer, and then I realised that everybody was doing it, so I sort of took my foot off the gas on the craft beer and concentrated on traditional. But there is a few months of me reviewing craft beer, and if you look at my Thornbridge reviews, you'll see that I gave them, I wouldn't say quite a low mark, but it was distinctly average. For not an average price, it was quite expensive. So I didn't really like them, to be honest. I remember the Wetherspoons, when they got rid of the Tuka Weiss beer, they introduced a Thornbridge white beer, which really wasn't nice. I didn't like it, and yeah, the rest is history. Anyway, let's finally get onto the beer. So it's a collaboration brew. Now they've called it an India Porter, which, again, this is what I was going to have a rant over. The whole saturation of the market with beers being labelled IPAs. To me, IPA doesn't mean anything anymore. That term doesn't mean anything, because anything could be an IPA. You could call a lager. I've seen it. I've seen lagers called India lagers and stuff like that. And here's an India Porter. I never thought I'd see the day, certainly not from Adnams, but here's an India Porter. I'll get onto why they've sort of called that name in a while, but I was cynical on that. And then the name Nevermore, well, that comes from the Edgar Allan Poe poem about the Raven. That's quite a good poem, actually. And Thornbridge had a beer called Dark Raven, I think it was called, or something like that. And that's where that's come from. Is it Dark Raven? I'm going to make myself look like a prat now. Wild Raven, sorry, Wild Raven. And they brought this out as a collaboration, but the emphasis for this was on sustainability. Now, I don't care if your views, if you're not a fan of saving the planet or being eco-friendly or whatever. I think it's a good idea. If for nothing else, it stops us from being wasteful bastards. Because when you see the amount of waste we produce, let's, I think, try and fucking not do that, eh? It would be much nicer if we could produce less waste and more sustainable, not just in the brewing industry, but in all industries, a more sustainable model for them all. I just think it makes sense. We may even save some money. Who knows? But that's why they've done this, and the feature is sustainability. And how they've got around that, or how they are promoting that, I should say, is they're using all local hop growers and all local malt suppliers as well. Now, the malt suppliers that they use are sourced from somewhere called the Holcombe Estate, which is near to them up there in Suffolk. And it could be argued that in Britain, the best malt comes from that area, Suffolk, Norfolk, around them farms around there, because it is a very agricultural part of the world. And testament to that is the St Peter's Brewery. They also have some really nice malty beers. They do traditional bitters and golden ales and whatnot, but the malt always stands out as being really good. Green King, they're up in that region. Fuck knows what's going on with them, but yeah, that's Green King for you. The hops are all UK grown hops. Now, the interesting thing about that is, and I'll get onto the varieties in the next section, but they're UK Chinook, Harlequin, Jester and Mystic. Now, usually Chinook is an American grown hop, Harlequin is an English hop, and the Jester and Mystic hops, I think, is it Jester? No, it's Harlequin. Harlequin is renowned for its resistance to disease, for example, mildew and stuff like that. So that's why that's becoming quite a popular hop. And what I like about it is, if you're growing American style hops over here, it's not going to give the same sort of flavours. Similar, but not exactly the same, because also you've got the geology and the environment as well that is going to affect the flavour. It might sound like it's not, but it does. Anyway, with that in mind, I'm fucking running out of steam here. With that in mind, let's investigate the beer. Right, it's a 330ml can, it's 5%, it's a porter. It is a collaboration between Adnams and Thornbridge. And it says on the side of the can, Our 2021 collaboration series focuses on our journey towards a sustainable future, working with like-minded breweries. With each collaboration brew, Adnams will make a new commitment, continuing our sustainability story. Nevermore is inspired by a combination of Adnams Ghost Ship 4.5 and Thornbridge's Brewery's Wild Raven, but reimagined using only UK hops. I think the Ghost Ship uses Chinook, I think it's Chinook. So they're only using UK hops in this one. Named after Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, Nevermore uses locally grown grain to add light toasted coffee notes to the juicy pineapple, grapefruit and pine flavours from UK hops. The result is an Indian porter that's bittersweet, just like Poe's Haunting. Yeah, should they have done that with a porter? I can only give you my answer once I've tasted it, but yeah, it doesn't really... I wouldn't have done that personally, but the proof is in the tasting. The IBUs on this are 42, so it's quite bitter, but let's get it open and let's see what's going on. This has come out the fridge. It is chilled, I would say. So hopefully I'm going to get all the flavours in here. Usually with a porter, you don't really need to serve it at room temperature. The flavours are usually quite strong. If it's brewed right, of course. And there goes a load of it spilt down my shirt. Well done, you twat. There it is in the glass. Looks like a porter. Nice head on it, white head. On the nose. That's Percy down there, by the way, scratching. That's interesting. So it's like a roasted malt. Chocolate and coffee, that type of malted, roasted flavour that you get on a stout or a porter. But I'm getting pineapple, grapefruit, tropical fruit, the usual sort of thing you would see in an American IPA or an American Pale Ale. There's some piney notes on there as well. I can definitely get that coming through. Not big, mind. It's a little bit subdued, but they are there. And it smells different, put it that way. It's quite a very, very dark brown colour. It may look black to you, but if you look at the bottom, that's a very dark brown, like a dark ruby colour. Let's get it down the hatch. Bottoms up. Wow, nice caramel malt finish on there with a little bit of toffee malt. Let me dive in again. I thought them hoppy notes were going to be bigger on the palate. They're not. They're quite subdued. You can taste them. But for me, the finish is the biggest thing on this. It's like roasted malt, caramel malt, and a touch of toffee malt in here as well. Now, the malts they put in this are quite interesting because you've got pale malt as your base malt, and there's amber, brown, and chocolate malt in there as well. So it's a bit of a combination sort of the colour chart going down from light to dark. So pale, amber, brown, chocolate. But it isn't bad, I have to say. It's not the worst beer I've tasted in the world. It's quite drinkable. The mouth feels good. There's no milk in this, so it's not ultra smooth. And it goes down quite nicely, I have to say. It's not, there's no obtrusive flavours. It's quite a smooth beer. Yeah, this is not bad actually. It's a bit of a creeper. I'm liking it more and more as it goes down. Now, the hops are never really massive in porter and stout. That's what I find, and this is why I find it a little bit confusing as to why they've chosen a porter to put all them American hops in. But it sort of works, if you know what I mean. The base flavours are there. Your roasted malt notes on there, you do get all that. It does taste like a porter. The hops, for me, I was expecting bigger hops, but it's not. It's quite subdued, quite subtle, and I like that. That's good. I don't think it would have worked if the hops were bigger than this. I think they've got the balance on this just right. Yeah, quite nice. Subtle piney notes, a little bit of resin on the finish. There's some grapefruit in there and a little bit of citrus, sweet citrus fruit. But then the finish, it's just all malt, and it's quite nice. There's even a bit of a biscuit malt finish on that I'm getting on there as well now. Yeah, no complaints whatsoever. That is not a bad beer, I have to say. Now, I'm assuming that this has been brewed by Adnams. Thornbridge haven't brewed this. This is all done in the Adnams Brewery. And their brewers are really good. I like what they do, and they've done quite a good job on this. This isn't bad. So what's the verdict on Nevermore by Adnams and Thornbridge, the collaboration? I looked at it and I thought it was going to be a rant because of the name. Now that shows how shallow I am. India Porter. I wouldn't have called it that. I'd called it like an American style porter maybe, or just American porter. That would have been, in my opinion, a better description, and you wouldn't have gone down that. I'm sure it's marketing that they've done that India Porter. There's no such thing as an India Porter, to be honest. You know, the whole thing about IPA, if you look at my video on IPA, I don't know, as I say, IPAs don't mean, the term IPA to me doesn't mean anything at all now. And I'm sure this has been done just for marketing. But that aside, it isn't bad. Oh, I was prepared to bash it and say, why the fuck have they put American hops into a porter? But it's quite subtle and it works. You do get that little hint of American style hop in there, but then, as you should do with a porter, you get the roasted malt flavour and a nice finish. There's a nice roasted biscuit, if you can imagine that. Not there is caramel in there, but it's like a roasted biscuit that you sort of get. If you can imagine that, that's what the finish is like. And it isn't bad. Very drinkable, I have to say. 5%. You could session it if you want. Not too bad at all. They say it's inspired by a combination of Adnams Ghost Ship and Thornbridge Brewery's Wild Raven. I'm assuming the Wild Raven is a porter. I haven't tried that, I don't think, but I probably won't either. Or should I? No, I don't know. Ghost Ship's nice. I didn't mind that. That's not a bad one from Adnams. It's one of their flagship beers, so I've tried that. I think I've reviewed it on the channel twice, maybe even. But yeah, I like it. It's good, and it's a good one from Adnams, and they haven't let me down. They never have, to be honest, Adnams. And there goes me being proved wrong by being cynical about having a collaboration with a craft brewer. They've got that right, and I would imagine that Adnams are a better brewery to collaborate with than Brewdog. So there you go. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10, and I'd recommend it. It's £2 for 330ml can. Now, in the same supermarket, on a shelf above it, you had for £2.50, you had the Hofbrau Helles, you had Fru Kölsch, and you had the Paulaner Weissbier for £2.50. So this is the dilemma, and they probably not made a lot out of this if they're selling this for £2 a can. I imagine their overheads are quite big, but it's worth a go. If you want a little bit of a twist, if you're a craft beer fan, you may like this, and it's a little bit different, but the price for me, that's why I'm giving it a 7.5 for a 330ml can. Yeah, £2 may sound like buttons, but what you can get for just a little bit more, I think is, yeah, there's better. I know they're different styles. Well, they're the West Indies Porter there. I think that was about £2.50. The Guinness West Indies Porter, really nice one as well. So there is competition there, but it ain't bad. And if you want to try it, or you see it in an Adnams pub, I don't know whether you'll see it on draft or keg. I'm not sure. I didn't research that, which is my bad, as they say in America. Then, yeah, if it is available, then get some, because it is nice. But yeah, I'll give that a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a worthy 7.5 out of 10, and I recommend it. But you know, just be aware that it's £2 a can, and if you're buying it in Morrison's, then there are other beers available. And remember, beer is working class champagne.